Welcome to Atheists Talk, a public access production of Minnesota Atheists. I'm your host tonight. My name is George Kane. My guest tonight is the chapter head of the Minneapolis Satanic Temple, John Wreisner. Welcome, John.
Thank you, George.
So, John, I'm sure that a lot of our audience has not heard of the Satanic Temple. So could you explain to us what the group is all about?
Well, the Satanic Temple was originally founded primarily as a means to address the aggressive, evangelical Christian agenda, primarily in public schools. The first official event, I suppose, that the Satanic Temple engaged in was the appearance of a couple of the founding members at a rally for prayer in schools, jokingly suggesting that we now had the opportunity to worship Satan in school. And that had predictable results. So eventually the idea sort of coalesced and became an organization that was primarily meant to sort of force the hand of fundamentalists and really demand the same protections that are afforded to other religious groups in a more highly visible and not necessarily antagonistic, but sort of contrary to what the authors of some of this legislation have in mind, I think.
Now, I'm sure that a lot of our viewers are thinking that, oh, well, but do you worship Satan?
No, we do not. We identify as atheistic Luciferians. So we don't have, as a body, as an institution, we have no belief in supernatural agency of any type. Certainly there may be members, hither and yon among other chapters who are sort of maybe Jeffersonian deists or some sort of, nondescript, but certainly there are no theists among us. And again, as a group, we are absolutely atheistic in our approach. So. And
there are other religions that do not consider themselves to be theistic.
Oh, absolutely.
Modern Buddhism, for example.
Indeed.
Yeah.
That's a common misconception, I think, especially among the practitioners of Abrahamic faith, that they hold the patent on what a religion means, namely that it's monotheistic and so on and so forth. So,
right, and the courts have ruled that for first establishment purposes, atheism is a religion.
Right.
So we enjoy the same protections of the Establishment Clause and Free Exercise Clause that any religion does. So tell us a little about this atheistic religion. What is the theory of it?
Well, we have 7 essential tenets that we follow and we try to adhere to in our personal lives and, of course, in our goings-on as a chapter. And most of them I won't labor you with all 7 and an explanation of all of them. I'm sure the viewers can look at our website at the end of the show. But it's primarily based around reason. Social justice works very strongly into our concepts. Personal autonomy is another key element. And all these elements sort of dovetail together neatly with the causes that we're the most passionate about. So things like reproductive rights. We have a campaign against corporal punishment in public school, which is still, shockingly enough, permissible in many places. That violates our idea of bodily autonomy and personal, physical integrity, so on and so forth. But ideally what we do is try to, establish compassion and an open rapport with anyone that will listen to our pleas for reason. And, we pursue a lot of litigation to that end, especially in regards to things like reproductive rights and bodily autonomy. The Minneapolis chapter is working towards assisting right to die legislation efforts. Ultimately, I think we identify as a religion by virtue of the fact that all of our members share common goals and common moral principles. We just don't have a supernatural component. I think most of us, I think it would be safe to say, are probably iconoclastic in some sense or another. Our ranks draw pretty heavily from artistic and musical backgrounds, that sort of thing. So there's definitely, the semiotics are there. It's hard to not recognize a Satanist when they walk into the room, I suppose. But really we're concerned with religious liberty and freedom from religion, in trying to guarantee that the American public is aware that this is a nation of religious plurality, that there isn't the Abrahamic faiths don't have the the ability or option to set the standard.
Okay. The Abrahamic religions would say, well, the justification for the Ten Commandments, which is the equivalent of your 7 fundamental tenets, is that it's God decreed. All right. That's what justifies it. What would you say is the basis, the foundation of the 7 fundamental tenets?
I think they've all proven to be principles that work well and will continue to work well into establishing a society and a culture that's based on equanimity and mutual respect, and not having to feel the need to denigrate or segregate one another on the basis of trivial concerns like sexual preference or religious preference or lack thereof. I think it emphasizes the importance of science and reason above the necessity for blind faith and obedience to an authority that is arguably not existent to make any suggestions as to what our behavior should or should not be. So we consider ourselves to be our own authority. We don't feel the need for any celestial mandate to do the right thing. So to that end, I would argue to a Christian suggesting that the Ten Commandments were a God-given set of rules. The Decalogue is arguably the greatest missed opportunity for moral instruction, I think, in the history of mankind, if that's the case. The first commandment is, you shall worship no other gods before me. That makes me question the motives of the deity that may have or may not have written that particular document. So, but yeah, our authority is ourself, and we don't seek or need permission to justify those tenets because they're sound.
Yeah, reason and human value. Now, do you find them that they're culturally specific, since it was devised by a group of people who are in this country, and do you think would be different in different places?
I think the application of them is necessary for people everywhere. I think the implementation would be certainly more difficult in certain parts of the world that are held under the iron grip of religious fundamentalism, and certainly in parts of the United States. But I think that the principles are ultimately beneficial to human beings everywhere, because they stress just caring for your neighbor and being a decent human being and relying on reason and verifiable facts, and righting wrongs when you commit them, recognizing them as such, and just doing your best to be morally upright in the larger sense. I often joke that the Satanic Temple is sort of the existentialists of the satanic community, and that the decisions that we make for ourselves, we make for the entire world. And so that attitude is important for us to maintain, just to guarantee that we're creating as close as we can get to a utopian society where free thought is valued above lockstep herd mentality.
In part, that sounds very Kantian, too.
Yes, there's elements of that, absolutely.
Yeah. So the members of the Satanic Temple have in common adherence to these 7 fundamental tenets. But these are not held to by all Satanists, is that correct?
That's correct. The Satanic Temple is substantially different than some of our forebears. We've long considered ourselves to be the next step in the evolution of satanic thought. Luciferianism or Satanism, or left-hand path, whatever you choose to call it, certainly has been around as long as there has been organized religion in some sense or another. We draw heavily from the idea of Lucifer as an archetype, and solely from that, in fact. A wholly fictional character that represents eternal rebellion and resistance against tyrannical and arbitrary authority. So we could have easily called ourselves the temple of Prometheus or Apollyon, but that doesn't really have the weight, the sort of gravitas that Satan does. There are other organizations older than our own, namely the Church of Satan. And although they also identify as atheistic Satanists, in their Satanic Bible, they talk about the efficacy of ritual magic, for instance, which we roundly decline to participate in. We don't believe in the efficacy of ritual. So, and they have some elements of social Darwinism, and they seem to have a fetishized authority to some level or another, and we are absolutely anti-authoritarian in every respect. We've made great attempts to distance ourselves from the Church of Satan, and the Temple of Set, I suppose, is another moderately large satanic organization, again, supernaturalist, and we're not interested in perpetuating any of those elements of Satanism, because again, we consider ourselves to be the evolving face of Satanism and satanic thought.
It's difficult, I think, for some people to become familiar with the name. That I told a lady a few days ago that I would be interviewing you, and I said that he's the head of the local Satanic Temple. And I heard her speaking on the telephone a short while later, and she said he'll be interviewing the head of the local Church of Satan.
Oh, yeah.
So getting exactly wrong.
Yeah, I suppose, from the man on the street's vantage point, it's just a semantic difference, but certainly in practice, in theory, they're worlds apart. There's seemingly an undercurrent of racism that is relatively common in the Church of Satan, which again, we absolutely have nothing to do with. We're welcoming to anyone of any, wherever you are on the spectrum of sexuality or gender or race. I mean, it's immaterial what your physical form looks like. We're welcoming to all parties. So we've gone to pretty great lengths to distance ourselves, and I think there's, again, with any religion, there's going to be orthodox adherents that claim primacy. Mm-hmm. So that's, I think, the primary struggle with the Church of Satan. And they've been around so long that people hear Satan and they immediately think, Church of Satan. So.
Yeah. Before we began, we were talking about the relations that the Satanic Temple has with other non-satanic groups.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, well, we have a great relationship with Minnesota Atheists, of course. Your whole team has been nothing but fantastic and welcoming to us. We're also very closely allied with the pagan community in Minneapolis, and they understand that we're not supernaturalists. One of my chapter mates is married to a woman who frequently comes to our meetings, and she identifies as a Wiccan. So she bears with good humor all the ribbing we give her for her spell casting and so on and so forth. However, we feel sympathetic towards them in that they're a disenfranchised and oft put upon group, under constant assault by fundamentalist Christians. We've got friends and allies in Magus Books in Dinkytown, and they're under constant attack from the Old Paths Baptist Church that come out there to, protest and shout them down and so on and so forth. So, as socially conscious Satanists, we feel it's our responsibility to guarantee that expressions of plurality are allowed to continue unimpeded. And I think that's why we have a soft spot for the pagan community, because they've, for so long been under the shadow of, Christianity and, broader spectrum atheism and everything. They're just sort of this, kind of a unwanted sort of group of people that are ultimately very peaceful and have a great deal in common with us.
Yeah. I think there's a range of the pagans also, that some are serious about the ritual, and right. Others regard it as with a little tongue in cheek.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. There's even within Satanism, there are people who participate in ritual solely as psychodrama. Mm-hmm. For no other reason than to sort of have a concrete physical representation of what it is they're trying to concentrate on, for instance. So, and certainly we don't object to anyone participating in ritual. I don't object to people going to church. I mean, so long as they're not trying to, litigate their way into mandating those behaviors. But yeah, we have enjoyed great relationships with the pagan community. The LGBT community has been extraordinarily welcoming to us. Mm-hmm. Our first public event was actually at Pride this past summer, and it was fantastic. I thought we'd have our tent burned down in the first 10 minutes, but people came from all corners of the park to thank us for being there and to congratulate us on our previous, litigation that other chapters had engaged in. So it's been fantastic. Minneapolis has been very warm to us.
That's really great. Let's see, but Satanists, the Satanic Temple has a history of political activism and litigation.
Absolutely.
Right? And I know that in that role, not everyone welcomes you.
Absolutely. You're right.
All right. So can you tell us some of the things that you've been involved in?
Sure. Well, we consider disobedience is our form of worship. So, especially when it comes to, trying to litigate a particular faith, and that's being a mandatory part of American life. The most high-profile case, I suppose, was the Ten Commandments monument on the Oklahoma City courthouse lawn. That was erected using private funding, but placed on public property, which was in direct violation of the Oklahoma State Constitution, and we felt also violated the Establishment Clause. So rather than seeking to remove it outright, we crowdfunded the construction of a 9-foot-tall, 1-ton statue of the Baphomet, which is the goat-headed, scary sort of satanic figure that's often associated with us, and sought to have it placed adjacent to the Ten Commandments monument to show that we are a nation of religious plurality. And the idea being that any attempt to reject our application to have this monument placed next to the Ten Commandments monument would be a tacit endorsement of Christianity as the religion of the state. And naturally, there was a huge struggle, and people were very, very upset. Ironically enough, during the litigation, a Christian drove his car into the monument and destroyed it. And the Satanic Temple offered to pay to have it restored so that we could erect our monument, because without the Ten Commandments, it would serve no purpose. We're trying to establish plurality. They declined our offer. The commandments were eventually restored. And just recently, this week in fact, they were removed from the State House ground, or from the courthouse grounds, under cover of darkness, which was appropriate, we thought. So we withdrew our request to have the Baphomet monument because it serves no purpose without another monument to complement and contrast it. And now we're seeking to do something similarly in Arkansas, which has a Decalogue on their courthouse lawn. So that's one of our largest and most high-profile cases, I suppose.
Do you think it would be fair to describe your political tactics as religious satire?
I think there's an element of it, absolutely. There's a gray area, I think, where people are unsure whether to recognize us as a legitimate religion, which we certainly consider ourselves to be, and whether or not some of the things that we're doing politically are meant just to elicit the, shocked sort of, the disbelief of the American public that we would dare to do these things to such, storied institutions. But I think, it's certainly, if people walk away from some of our litigation chuckling, I have no problem with that. I'm happy to brighten anyone's day. But we do it in all sincerity, because it is important to us that we establish that we are a nation of plurality, and that we don't have Abrahamic faiths, taking center stage in public discourse.
Has there ever been anything like a court ruling that ruled that you are a religion, or maybe the military making a ruling that you are a religion?
I know the U.S. military does have, their chaplain's handbook has rituals for satanic soldiers.
Okay.
And that came about as a result of Anton LaVey and the Church of Satan, so we had nothing to do with that. Certainly, the Constitution guarantees us the freedom to, be satanic and so on and so forth. But in terms of, requiring any legitimacy from the government, that's never really been of any primary concern to us, only insofar as we're able to express that, we are an independent, group of religious believers that are demanding equal protection and equal representation. So.
Okay, what else has Satanic Temple done in the political arena?
Well, there was the coloring book scandal. That was pretty funny. I will call that one hysterical.
Yeah.
There was a school district in Florida that was allowed to distribute Bibles on campus. So we put together a satanic children's activity book,
Right.
which
And,
was...
and as I recall, their defense was, well, we're not doing it. We're just allowing the
Correct.
the Gideons to come
Right.
come on campus, and they're doing it.
Precisely.
Right.
So we, put together a satanic activity book, which is potentially the least offensive thing you'll ever read in your life. Certainly compared to the Bible, it paled in comparison. It was a connect the dots pentagram, and some kids hanging around the Baphomet statue and these sorts of things, and the 7 tenets, and talk about our core beliefs. And we presented it to the school board, and they immediately decided that no one could distribute religious propaganda of any type on campus, and that's fine. I mean, that was our goal all
Right.
along. The Satanic Activity book would have served absolutely no purpose, and we're not interested in converting anyone. That's totally counterintuitive to our beliefs. But they decided that no one could distribute religious information, and that was precisely what we wanted, so that was a win.
Right. Atheist groups have found themselves in that situation too, where the FFRF has gone to court to try to end a religious display in the state capitol, and the courts have ruled that it's permissible as long as as there's balance, and so they've had to come out with their own display to counter it. Yeah.
We've had some holiday displays, chapters. In fact, the Minneapolis chapter hopefully will have theirs up this year, but there's been a number of chapters that have petitioned for holiday displays to greater or lesser degrees of success. The Detroit chapter had one of their holiday displays destroyed by a woman who identified as a Catholic, and it was, again, not at all a violent or in any way disagreeable holiday display. It was a Lucifer falling into the lake of fire and happy holidays from the Satanic Temple, and she tore it apart and was taken to court, but of course judged to be not guilty and so on and so forth, which again we anticipated. We generally are on the losing side of public opinion, so it was to be expected, but it served an important message, sent an important message in that plurality is the law of the land perhaps, but never really respected as such in practice by the court of public opinion.
What sort of legal support are you getting? Are you do you have your own lawyers, or is there support from ACLU perhaps, or FFRF?
I've been speaking with some members of the ACLU. We also have affiliates and Satanic Temple members throughout the country who are constitutional law attorneys, criminal law. I mean, basically every avenue of legal practice you can imagine. We either have sympathetic attorneys who are willing to work pro bono or at very reduced rates, or members who are involved with the temple that are willing to utilize their professional skills in furtherance of our cause. And it's on a chapter-to-chapter basis. We operate largely autonomously. We are beholden, of course, to the executive ministry, and we do everything we can to not besmirch the name of the temple and to act in accordance with the tenets. But when it comes to legal representation, it's sort of the obligation of the individual chapter to establish a legal team.
What violations of Establishment Clause have you found in Minnesota to take action against?
I mean, there's a multitude. There certainly decalogues on various public buildings. They're too numerous to mention, I suppose. So we're looking more at our actions are based more on a case-by-case basis. Some of the more high-profile, like removing of statues and monuments and this sort of thing are, I think, further down the road for us, for our chapter. There's plenty of chapters doing that in the rest of the country. Right now, we're primarily focusing on LGBT issues in Minnesota because we feel that's where we're the most needed. Things like homeless LGBT youth, and we have a concern with District 11 and their rash of teen suicides. All of the students were either gay or perceived to be such by their peer group. And so we feel that their district policy isn't necessarily in violation of the Establishment Clause, but is certainly giving tacit approval to a Judeo-Christian approach towards human sexuality and the sin that comes along with homosexuality, and so it's putting a group of at-risk kids at even greater risk.
Right. LGBT civil and human rights are an important issue also for Minnesota Atheists, because the political discussion has been so dominated by religious dogma.
Oh, indeed, absolutely. And it's hard for me to, when people ask about violations of the Establishment Clause, it's almost impossible for me philosophically to separate the human rights issues from the Establishment Clause, because so many of the things that impact human rights are, subsequently affected by the incursion of fundamentalist Christian thought into the sphere of public politics. So, as far as I'm concerned, virtually everything that we experience as atheists or non-believers or free thinkers is in some way or another, impacted by what's largely sort of a de facto theocracy that's being forced on us by the GOP. And so, I find it hard to see anything that isn't in some way a violation of the Establishment Clause by virtue of the fact that the public discourse has been controlled, to such a great extent.
We're near the end, John, so if anyone watching the program wants to find out more about the Satanic Temple or wants to get involved, what would you like to tell them?
You can email us at tstmpls@gmail.com. Alternately, you can go to the satanictempleminneapolis.com. You can find us on Facebook if you just search for the Satanic Temple Minneapolis. We do meet bi-weekly. If you email tstmpls@gmail.com and ask to be put on our newsletter, you'll receive meeting locations and times, so on and so forth. We do have a whole host of events where we plan various litigation and so on and so forth, and social events. So there are plenty of avenues to contact us.
Well, thank you, John, and best of luck.
Thank you very much, George.
Satanic
I appreciate
Temple. And I hope that our viewers tonight are interested in this program and in our organization, Minnesota Atheists. And if you contact us at the contact information that you've seen on the bottom of your screen at different times during the program, we'll be glad to send you one copy of our newsletter if you send us your postal address. So if you're interested in us, we're interested in you.